Welcome back, guys. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Fitness Experiment Podcast. Jesse and I, today we're going to talk about some big fitness industry myths. So ones that just keep popping up over and over and over again, just will not die. Hopefully we can do a little bit of a rapid fire here. So cover as much or as many different myths as we can. And kind of, I think with a lot of these, we can probably spare a lot of the long rambling details and just give you guys the answer.
Yeah, that's good.
Know.
I'll set a timer on each one.
I like that idea.
I'll get my phone.
I need that.
We'll go 5 minutes per.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I'll give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek right now. This would be a perfect one to have like a call in if we could.
Yeah, for sure. Because there's just so many out there. It's hard to think of them off the top of your head.
Yeah.
But I think as we get going too, some more will come up.
Yeah. So a couple we're going to go over. We'll go over the anabolic window. So this idea that you need protein ASAP after your workout. We'll talk about artificial sweeteners, the whole calories in, calories out idea, if it fits your macros, some questions around the elderly and lifting and training, dairy questions, how much protein you can absorb in one sitting, how protein before bed affects sleep, and so on and so on. That should get us started anyways.
Yeah. Let's talk about calories in, calories out.
Alrighty.
I feel like that's one that it'll be tough to keep to 5 minutes, but
I agree.
You let me know when you're ready. I'll start the clock.
All right, start it.
Okay, going.
Well, so I think it will be easier than usual because there was a recent study that came out that looked at, so let me get this out of the way. So anytime you talk about calories in versus calories out, or whether carbs versus fats matter, you have to say, is this study or is what we're comparing isocaloric? So what I mean by that is, let's say you're comparing like a high carb, high fat diet. Are the calories that you're consuming the same across both? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So this particular study, they looked at, it was isocaloric, but they looked at the effect of low carb versus high carb in some individuals. And they found that lower carb diets improved insulin sensitivity, so reduced some markers of insulin resistance without weight loss. So that's important. That's the point I want to get across, is that, and just to use, we'll kind of use Lane Norton as the example because he's the biggest example. He has a lot of good stuff, but I've said before I disagree with a lot of his stuff. But anyways, he's big on this. He always says that all these benefits of whatever, fasting, keto, et cetera, he basically says that all of these are due to just simply weight loss. So the reason this is important is because there was not weight loss and they found benefits strictly from reducing carbohydrate intake. So again, I'm not telling everyone to lower their carbs. I'm not telling everyone to go keto, but just now we know this. And this isn't the first study either. Like they also found that inflammation was lowered. So a couple key takeaways there, I guess.
Yeah. So let me try and get this straight. So are you saying that the difference in caloric intake isn't responsible for weight loss, or it is?
It definitely is. Yeah, it definitely is. I think, yeah, I probably made that a little bit more confusing than it needs to be. So still, the number one most important thing for weight loss and fat loss is still total calories. So you still want to be burning more energy than you are consuming. That's still the number one most important factor. But this shows us that it may not be the most important factor for things like inflammation, things like blood sugar health, things like insulin, some other metabolic markers. So yeah, this study just shows that there's much more to it than that. You could keep your weight stable, just kind of flip-flop your macronutrients around a little bit and improve some of these markers. So I guess if we give the people kind of like a practical example. So let's say, let's say you're working with an athlete and they're always complaining about being tired in between meals and maybe sleeping like crap, say. So instead of telling that person, all right, well, we need you to lose some weight for you to improve these markers, you might just say, well, instead, let's just cycle your carbs down for a bit and bring your fat up, as an example.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay.
Cool.
Next. That was good. 3.5 minutes. Boom.
Woo.
Next.
Felt longer.
That was good.
All right. Well, I got one for you then, or you start with this one at least.
Yep.
We've talked a little bit about this one before, but this idea that elderly people or older people should not deadlift is what we hear the most, right? Because it's bad for your back. But I think in general, we also hear older people should not lift heavy weights or should not strength train or something along those lines, right?
Yeah, it seems to be the two ends of the spectrum that are like kind of similar. So elderly being one and then kids being the other.
Yeah.
The blanket statement that it shouldn't be lifting at all or doing resistance training or anything like that, that's false for sure. But saying that it's not going to look different is false also. So like for us, our strength training routine is going to look a lot different than what I would prescribe for somebody who's 9 and just as it would from somebody who's 70. But the principles are the same, right? Putting your body under load and building up the adaptations from that training are valuable across all ages. And I would argue it's most important to get young people started because just solely for the reason that it's a habit that you can help somebody develop, and they're going to keep that going throughout their entire life if it's something that they have learned to enjoy and it's something that has been a part of their life for a long time. With the elderly population, the resistance training might simply be like resistance band squats onto a chair.
Yeah.
But it's still working your body through the same patterns and still increasing the demand on the body relative to baseline. So, which is going to cause adaptations. So if you take somebody who's elderly, and that looks different for everybody too, because I mean, there's 60-plus-year-old division in the CrossFit Games, and those individuals look very different than your stereotypical elderly person, since they have been so active for so long. And the longevity to be able to still train at that intensity at that age is super impressive. Do I think that should be the target? Absolutely not. I think it's more important just be able to get up out of the chair and get yourself to the washroom and maintain your independence. But resistance training is more important at those ages than any other age, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But we spend so much time focusing on it in those middle years, and then we usually taper off towards the end, which is, I think, because of what you just said, the myth that it shouldn't be happening because could be dangerous. But that doesn't mean anything. Having an article say something's dangerous doesn't prove that it's dangerous. You have to actually go through the proper scientific processes to prove that something's dangerous.
Yeah.
And that's what's missing, because every time you try and do a study to prove that it's dangerous, it comes up the opposite. So it's that in itself kind of tells the whole story.
I find this one's a really hard point to get across to people, the lay person, or maybe someone who just isn't like a regular gym goer, I suppose, like someone who, you know, even if they're active and maybe they do read a lot of newspapers, a lot of media, because this is kind of where we, I think, see this pop up the most. But yeah, I don't know why. It's just a hard point to get across. I think it's hard to explain to people how and why that can be the total opposite than other than the word dangerous. I was thinking about this earlier today. Like, you have to also think about, like, muscle's basically like an organ, right? And it's like one of the most protective organs that you can have. I know that sounds kind of strange to people, but if you think about, I kind of see like two sides to this argument. You can talk about how it's important for like functional purposes. So like you just said, That's getting up out of the chair, getting to the fridge, getting to the washroom. If you're not living on a 1-floor house or apartment, that's getting up the stairs, it's getting out of bed. It's even like dealing with falls on ice, falls at home. It's such a long list. And then the other side of that argument that I was going to bring up is like the metabolic side of things. So having more muscle, we've talked about this a lot. Like it's basically like a dumpster for sugar, right? And that doesn't mean that people are eating a bunch of sugar and it's just going to muscle. It just means that it's having more muscle is going to help maintain steady blood sugar. That means it's going to prevent cognitive decline, like literally. So it's kind of like a storage depot that just makes the rest of your body that much healthier. I know that's very vague, but we're trying to just give the answer.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to bring up the other side of the argument because I think people forget about that having muscle doesn't just mean you're strong. It also means that your metabolic profile is just going to be that much more optimized, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. And again, this doesn't mean like, I'm not talking about like 60-year-old bodybuilders or 65-year-old people deadlifting or doing powerlifting. Like it's just, maintaining that healthy level of lean muscle.
Right.
And we've talked a little bit about the whole like sarcopenia thing before, this idea of muscle wasting with old age, and that's a serious thing. So
yeah. As a comparison, people spend a lot of their life building up some sort of savings, like dollar savings for retirement when in old age so that they can stop working. It works the same way with your muscle mass. You have to develop that muscle mass while your body is set up to do that so that you have a larger savings account.
I like that.
Built up to help it extend the quality of life. Because right now we do a really good job at keeping people alive, but we're having a hard time getting anywhere with convincing people to be healthier and more active, because you can take a pill for stuff or live in a hospital for 15, 20 years, but that's not ideal, right? Like we want to have our longevity, in my opinion. I don't think we should take like mortality as the measure, like how long people are living.
Yeah.
I think it should be like the quality of those years and independence and things like that. There's exceptions to everything, right? Like accidents and stuff like that would affect it, but I think it's a bit of a better marker.
Yeah, that's always an argument I think that comes up when you talk about, this could be about anything, whether it's nutrition, fitness, anytime you're talking about something that improves like wellness or health, the counter argument is always, well, then why is the life expectancy so much longer? And right. I think you raised a really good point. The other thing, like one thing that people don't realize when this comes up is it's average, right? What's one field that we've made like leaps and bounds in? Well, it's actually keeping newborns alive. Like children who are born, premature, children who are born with some type of other complication. Like previously, and I'm not just talking about like 100 years ago, I'm talking about even like thousands of years ago, because they'll make that argument too. Like, well, even in just the past 1,000 or 10,000 years, like life expectancy has gone up by like 30 years. So what are you talking about? Well, it's average. So if you get like, just to give you a number, like if you get like, say 10% of babies die, well, that's going to bring that average way down, right? Yeah. Like, it's sometimes it's not like an accurate representation. And then the other thing I think is just like clean water, like sanitation, like that's becoming more and more common. It's obviously still not everywhere, but that too, that's probably the biggest factor, that is just having clean water, sanitation, and obviously that's going to improve life expectancy significantly. So I don't think it's really like you said, I don't think it's really like a viable counter argument.
I agree. Let that one go 10 minutes because we segued from resistance training in the elderly community to life expectancy and longevity. So
this is hard. And I did have one more point too. Not that this is really a myth, but I was having this conversation with someone at the gym yesterday. So I'll throw it in here, is just this idea that, your muscle building signal does become a little bit like turned down or worn out or dampened with age. So post strength training, there's a lot of work showing that you need more protein immediately post workout as a older individual to get that same strength of muscle building signal. So as like a legit kind of number comparison, the majority of people in younger cohorts, so when I say younger cohorts, it's on average, say like below, say like 55 or 60. Again, there's no perfect cutoff, but they're fine with roughly 20 grams of protein to get that same strength of signal. Whereas if you're in that older cohort, you need upwards of double that to get the same strength of signal. So it's just this idea that signal's turned down a little bit, and so you just kind of have to hit it a little bit harder.
Okay.
And then pair that with some omega-3 fish oil, and that seems to help a lot too. So I think there's a lot of ways you can mitigate this idea of muscle wasting with old age. I just don't think that we're taking every advantage possible yet.
Let's segue that into our window of gains.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I have a shirt from Barbell Shrugged that I got in like 2015 or something it's a window flexing muscles, because it was something that they used to make fun of on their podcast. And for some reason, it's still a thing that people talk about.
It does seem to be a thing.
So let's talk about that. Because what's the window? It's like 30 minutes is...
I think that's what they say, yeah. And they call it the anabolic window.
Right.
This idea that you need to... Basically, in order to build muscle in response to your training session, you need to get protein in within 30 minutes post-workout.
Right.
I mean, I think that's what the argument is. Or maybe it's you're going to build more muscle if you get it in sooner. That's just not the case. There, 3 seconds.
That didn't take very long.
No. So I was reading a review paper on this the other day, and it was just kind of beating around the bush about all the studies they've done on this. And basically their conclusion was some research shows that it is beneficial, and at least the same amount of research, if not more, shows that it makes no difference. And that the most important thing is just how much total protein you are taking in within that 24-hour time window, or within your eating window for that day, I should say.
Right.
And that timing isn't... there's definite exceptions here, and we'll probably get into those, but overall, it really doesn't make a difference. So the exception would be if you are doing 2-a-days. So obviously at that point, you would want to have some protein and carbohydrates ASAP after workout to start replenishing that glycogen. Even that, though, there's exceptions. I don't really want to get into those because it makes things confusing.
Right.
But that would be one definite exception. And then obviously, if you're going to work out and then do like a 24-hour fast right after, okay, you're probably going to lose a little bit of muscle when doing that. But even that, with all of these, there seems to be bounce back and compensatory mechanisms. So one example is when you are fasting, your ketones increase. And if your ketones are up around 2.0 millimolar, which a lot of people could get there within probably 20 hours of fasting. Once they get to that level, they literally protect your muscle from being broken down. So that's one super cool mechanism. It's you have absolutely nothing coming in, and then your body's just cranking up this signal that's literally preserving your muscle. Growth hormone can do something similar. So yeah, I mean, and just for anecdotally, I don't even mean to do this, but I would say probably like 7 out of 10 times over the course of a year, I don't take anything in after my workout for at least like 90 minutes. And this isn't even, again, this isn't intentional. It's just because often, and you know how this is, it's like if you're working out and coaching after, you work out up until like 60 seconds before you have to coach that class sometimes.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of forget about it. And I don't know, from doing that, I sure don't notice anything, even in terms of like recovery or being able to adapt to your sessions, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. One of those things that people just like to fixate on, and without understanding whether or not it's actually something that will affect their training or recovery or not.
But if we do kind of tie that into the elderly argument, well, then now we're talking about a population who, you probably do want to get it in as soon as possible because you want to take every possible precaution that you can. So it's so individual, always.
There was another protein one, wasn't there, that you had?
Yeah. This argument that you can only absorb a certain amount in one sitting.
Yeah.
Is that one still out there?
Yeah. I've heard 20 grams and I've heard 30 grams are the two main things that I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, like, if you just think about this one kind of from like a, like the ultimate simplistic perspective is like, okay, well, then what happens when you eat like an 8-ounce T-bone or an 8-ounce ribeye? Like, because that's far more than 30 grams of protein. So where's that going?
Yeah.
Where
does it go?
You don't run to the crapper right afterwards, do you?
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, your body stores it. Like, those are valuable amino acids. So it'll just hang on to it. And you actually have like what's called a amino acid pool, where your body will just hang on to these excess amino acids in your intestines, and then it will release them later on when you need them. So I guess technically, yes, you can only put like 30 grams to use for building muscle, but A, there's a lot more uses for that, and B, it will hang on to that quote unquote excess until later and then use it.
I think that's what people are fixating on, is the fact that they're only focused on protein being necessary for muscle building, and they're not thinking about the fact that you have that muscle building process that happens, but protein's also responsible for everything else that's in your body. It's not just about building muscle. Let's keep going with the supplement ones. Let's go to creatine.
Okay.
Two things. I think we've all had our moms freak out. If we started training at a younger age and we started taking creatine, your mom for sure freaked out because she thought you were on steroids.
Yeah.
And then second,
That's true.
It's bad for your kidneys. And then third one with creatine is loading.
Oh, yeah.
Loading phase.
What was your first creatine supplement? Or what was your first story?
Oh, man. What was it? Purple K?
That was
Purple
me
K.
too.
Yeah.
And which probably makes this even worse, because those do, if anything, if creatine were to ever look like something sketchy, it's Purple K.
It's just a sketchy name too.
Yeah. So if you haven't heard of this or aren't familiar with it, it would come in this little, I don't know, how big were the containers? Like,
they kind of like an Advil looking sort of thing.
Yeah, probably about that.
Maybe a bit bigger. More like a Tums container.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the whole bottle, literally just straight purple.
Yeah.
Black cap. And then the cap, it was capsules. It wasn't a powder, like freaking horse pills.
Huge.
That are pure purple. So that's the other thing, is like the amount of trouble they're going through to make these capsules a nice, deep, dark purple.
Oh yeah. Your tongue was purple if you didn't slug it down right away.
And I think you were popping like 3 to 4 of these capsules at once. Because if you think about how big, you people that have used creatine, think about how big like a 5-gram scoop is.
Right.
So to try and pack that all into a capsule is quite the
I think
volume.
they were like 500 milligram caps. So you had to take a bunch of them.
Yeah.
It was a lot. It was a handful.
So I can still remember when and a couple friends and I first started using this, we would probably, I want to say like grade 10, because we would, our last class of the day was, it was like a wood shop or something, or like some type of design class. I can't remember, tech or something. And we would go out with like, 30 minutes left in that last class of the day. So go out at like 2:30, go to the locker, get the purple K out of the backpack in the locker, pop a few, got to get that into the system ahead of time, and then finish the class, and then you head straight to the gym after school. And that was their thing. And it got to a point where I know our teacher, he was a pretty cool teacher. I mean, willing to shoot the shit and joke around, and it became a joke even with him. Like, he would know every single time when we're leaving what we're doing. Like, oh, you boys going to get your creatine, all right? I'll see you soon. So, yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah. So is there, well, okay, is creatine a steroid?
It is not.
It's not a steroid. Why is
So you make your own creatine, and you also will get creatine from food. It's high in red meat, for example.
Mm-hmm. What is creatine?
Yeah, it's basically just an energy source in its simplest form. Helps you make ATP, really. Mm-hmm. If you're going through, well, and I'm interested to hear your take on this too, because you'll program workouts according to people's creatine system, right? So it's your energy source that you're using first and foremost for the first. What don't they say? It can last for, say, like up to maybe like 10 seconds.
Yeah, it depends. The literature's all different.
Yeah,
some will say 10, some 12, some 8. It's just,
yeah.
I don't know. It depends on the author, really,
and then
the time.
Yeah, and so those kind of, as it goes, you'll burn through that and then switch into a different energy system. And then as you rest, you restock that and then kind of go again. So think like, think of like 3 to 4 sets of squats at a few reps. That's mostly creatine energy system, creatine phosphate. Yep.
Anything really explosive, high recruitment, super short duration, long jump, 80-meter dash.
So I already know the answer, but when you're programming for someone, how often do you think about that? Like, I'm going to program them this because I don't want them to switch over into that next energy system. Like, I know you do a lot of energy system stuff. Yeah.
Definitely a lot in the off season where we're focusing more on that CP. So the creatine phosphate, and then longer aerobic pieces that are lower intensity. Trying to stay away from that anaerobic lactic system, the burning one. So basically, like, you can kind of do this test for yourself. Like, get on an assault bike, sprint as hard as you possibly can right from 0, and see how long it takes for it to start burning. Once it starts burning, you switched over. Just as like a very simple, watered down example, that would be one. You could just run in a straight line too. Start off on an all-out sprint, and when your power starts to drop and it starts to burn a little bit, you probably switched over.
Yeah, that's cool.
And knowing that energy systems are on a dimmer switch, it's not like one or none. They're all working all the time. It's just whatever one is the main producer of energy. But all you're wondering at max is that CP stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're not eating meat, should be supplementing creatine.
Yeah. And I think we both argue that everyone would benefit from creatine supplementation.
Yeah, I agree. Unless you're on a carnivore diet and you're eating a couple steaks every single day, then you're definitely getting an abundance of creatine and don't need to supplement it. But yeah, we've talked about this before, but maybe still should at some point do like its own dedicated episode, I think, because it's
so versatile.
That's the word I was looking for. The brain thing is crazy, man. Like post-concussion, pre-concussion, prevention of concussion, not a doctor, but lots of work showing that it can be beneficial for that. It's crazy. So then you think about, we've obviously dug into a lot of like plant-based nutrition lately, which again, like you can make that work, but one thing that you're going to have to be supplementing, in my opinion, is creatine, because that's something pretty valuable that you're going to be missing out on, regardless of whether or not you're an athlete.
Yeah. To speak on the power of it too, my grandpa had a stroke. The very first
you're
supplement they put him on was creatine.
Yeah.
It was creatine, balanced omega supplement, and pretty close after CBD. But I think that's a whole other podcast on that. Yeah. But yeah, it's
we still don't know like what the optimal level of creatine is in the brain, or like what the optimal dose is to get it into the brain. So I think that's, in my opinion, that's kind of like a cool emerging area of research, is figuring that out, and figuring out, you know, like, is there a best time to get it into the brain? Is there something that you have to pair it with? So I think there's definitely some potential there for everything. I mean, prevention of cognitive decline, dementia, Alzheimer's, et cetera, et cetera. What were we talking about?
It's not a steroid.
Yeah, we got that out of the way. Bad for the kidney, I think, is another one.
Oh yeah, that was the third one.
Yeah, because it'll increase your creatinine, which is a marker in the kidney. So if you get like basic panel for your kidney, used to be, I know actually a lot of doctors will still make this recommendation, is if they see high levels of creatinine, they'll see that as like a red flag and ask you if you're taking creatine, and then potentially encourage you to stop taking it. But from everything I've read, and from talking to other doctors who are kind of up to date with this idea of creatine supplementation, they'll say that elevated creatinine is absolutely no problem unless it's seen alongside some other markers of kidney damage. I can't really speak to the specifics of those other markers. Like, I know the names of them. Like one is EGFP, I think it's called, which is like glomerular filtration rate. So kind of this, basically like how, or like the rate or the speed at which your kidney is filtering through these substances, basically. So that's, again, kind of vague, but that's one of the other markers. And point being is that you need to do more of an in-depth investigation. And big takeaway is that no, creatine is not bad for your kidneys.
That happened to Kale's mom.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. So from my understanding of how it went down, she went to her like general health practitioner doctor, and they were concerned about the levels. I believe there's also a history of kidney disease in her family, so that might have been part of the initial concern by the family doctor, but was sent to a specialist, and the specialist said essentially what you just said, like, it's not really, like, she's really low body fat, fit, strong, not 30. So maybe the levels were just elevated relative to the average of other people that the doctor saw that are her age, and that was a red flag for some reason. But I think she left a little bit confident, like, oh, I'm super jacked, and rightfully so.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's just, blood work's a tricky thing, man. That's just another good example, in my opinion, about how context is so darn important all the time, including with this blood work. Because in that specific scenario, like, again, if you weren't able to see that quote unquote patient, if you weren't able to see like whether or not they're fit, their body composition, yada, 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 and all you could see was their lab work, you might think something completely different, right? And it might mean something completely different. You get blood work done after a workout, it might look like you're totally inflamed, and they'll be raising red flags everywhere. And so, yeah, it's never, rarely is it a yes or no. I listened to Paul Saladino is his name, which is the medical doctor that's big behind the carnivore diet. He talked a little bit about this on one of his podcasts too, and I need to revisit it because he kind of goes into a little bit more detail on this idea of like creatine, how it affects the kidneys, et cetera, et cetera. And he gave the same conclusion as we're giving right now, but just if anyone wants to take a little bit of a deeper dive on that, then I would definitely check that out, and I'll post that somewhere. But podcast name is, I forget.
We'll put it
Paul
in the show
Saladino
notes.
though, MD,
Yeah.
Carnivore MD. Look him up. Interesting stuff. What'd we miss? Bad for the kidneys. Not a steroid.
Oh, loading. Loading
Oh,
phase
yeah.
associated.
Yeah.
So I think the general thing that you'll read on the label would be 5 days of 20 grams.
Something like that. Yeah. Which you just don't need to do.
Yeah.
You also don't need to cycle off of it. You
Oh,
can.
that's another big one too.
Yeah.
It says take 3 weeks, 1 week off or something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Which, you know what? I think if they're making that recommendation for you to save money, great.
Right.
Because you could save money that way, because that during that 1 week, it's still in your system. And so you're still getting the benefits from creatine, even though you're not taking it every single day. But if they're saying cycle off of it or else it will cause long-term risk or damage, that's not the case at all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those supplements that builds up over time.
Yeah.
And you're not going to feel an immediate effect like you would from like a caffeine pill
Yeah.
or
So that's
something
another
like that.
important point. Yeah.
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 Just stay consistent with it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter when you take it.
Nope.
Just make sure you're 5 grams.
Yep.
Very good.
If you're
And
super
it's-
sleepy though, try taking about 15 grams. See if you feel better.
Yeah.
Because you need a bigger dose for it to get into your brain. Again, we don't really know what the dose is, but that should be enough to get some into your brain. And it does help if it's in a stressful situation. So a stressful situation would be concussion or sleep deprivation. So
Here we go. All right, what do we got that's not supplement related over there?
is dairy supplements?
No. We'll do that one.
Well, but what is the myth? I literally just wrote down dairy question mark. I just know that it's a hot topic.
Yeah, I think one big one is sensitivity.
Yeah. I think technically there's only 1 in 4, so 25% of the world's population that is technically able to actually digest lactose. It's not very many. Now, on the other hand, does that other 75% notice it in terms of symptoms, or notice it in terms of negative health consequences? Not everyone.
Right.
No, and I don't have a number for you.
Yeah. For me, if I eat any dairy product, I'm nothing gut related, but I definitely get congested.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the back of my throat, I get a little phlegmy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's 100% just something that I've noticed. So, so it's obviously some sort of response from my body since it happens every time.
Do you notice a difference?
Definitely
at all?
not saying that sensitivity is a myth.
No.
Maybe the question is is dairy necessary to a diet?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of potential benefits from including it, and there's maybe some potential benefits for not including it.
So
I think
non-essential.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But I think this is the most important thing when it comes to dairy, is because so many people avoid it. Well, then you need to look into getting calcium elsewhere, because that's about the only good source of calcium. And calcium is bloody important. So,
And when you make recommendations for dairy products, you always go fuller fat.
yeah. So that's what I was going to ask you. Do you notice the difference if the dairy is, say, full fat, not full fat, organic, not organic?
Higher fat percentages are better. Raw milk was something that was pretty regular in my diet for 2 years or something like that. And no problems with that at all.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So Don't have an explanation, but just a noticing.
Yeah. Well, if it's not raw, it's been like boiled down, right? Which, like, you just think about that. That doesn't seem normal for a dairy source to be boiled down so that it can sit on a shelf for many, many weeks or months.
Yeah.
Like, if you ever look at the expiry date on, say, like whatever, like a carton of full fat cream that's organic versus not organic, the one its expiry date will be like over a month away. The other one is like a week away.
Right.
So there's big difference. And like you said, there's even bigger difference between pasteurized and raw. So pasteurized means it's been boiled down and it's had a lot of the bacteria removed from it. Raw is, she's all there. Mm-hmm. Straight from the cow.
Oh yeah, and you got to drink it in a week or else it's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you can't leave it at all.
No.
And that's like with it being picked up from the farm that same week. It's like you gotta get it in, otherwise it starts to get a little funky real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. You make some cheese in the fridge.
You got to scoop that layer of cream off the top and eat that before you even get to the milk.
That's the goods.
Oh yeah.
Coffee's never been better.
Oh yeah, so good. So I guess the point we're trying to make with this one is that the statement that dairy is bad and inflammatory, that's BS. Because again, no, it depends on the source and many other things. Right. Well, so that's why I always tell people, like, if they tell me that they have a sensitivity to dairy, I say, well, try these other sources. You might find it's completely fine.
Yeah.
Or A1 versus A2. That's another example. Just it's a different protein in A1 versus A2 types of dairy. So A2 is hard to find, but that's like goat's milk and dairy, or it's like a specific, I can't remember, it's like a specific breed of cow that makes A2, but then the majority is A1. So most people have, when they say they're sensitive, it's probably to this A1. And so again, if you try raw or if you try A2, you might be fine.
Cool. We got any more?
Yeah, we could go over, what do you say? I don't know. The artificial sweeteners one's kind of another, like, it's another tricky one, right? It's another one that people just want a yes or no answer, and it just doesn't exist. It's kind of like the dairy. It just depends on so many things. Like, with the artificial sweeteners thing, so just this idea that, one thing I definitely don't agree with is these blanket statements that people make saying artificial sweeteners will cause you to gain weight. Like, no, that's a pretty bold statement. Does it contribute to some people gaining weight because it increases their cravings and makes them want to eat more sweets, and thus they eat more total calories and gain weight? It's possible,
right?
Perhaps. Mm-hmm. So you got to throw your thinking cap on.
Yeah. Yeah, stuff like that for sure. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see, artificial sweeteners. One thing I've heard is that the body receives it the same way it would sugar. So if you say you drink energy drink that's sweetened with stevia or something like that, the argument is that your body reacts to that sweetness the same way it would any regular sugar.
And I think there is definitely some truth to that, in that you have taste receptors on your tongue. So as that artificial sweetener's coming in, your brain really is detecting that, and then in some instances it will increase insulin, basically in order to get ready for that, what it thinks is incoming sugar. Again, does this happen with everyone? Probably not. Probably only some people. Same reason that you might have a huge increase in blood sugar from whatever, like a banana, and I might have a big one from an apple instead of a banana. So they do this a lot, right? Like, they'll give 20 different people the same slice of white bread, they find that some people it jacks up their blood sugar and other people are totally fine. So there's probably the same thing going on here. And so if that is going on, well then yeah, like you're probably not doing yourself any good if you're consuming these sweeteners like 10 times a day, because that will contribute to some issues with blood sugar and insulin. So I think you just kind of need to do a self-assessment, like, hey, do I feel any different after taking these? Does my gut feel okay? Yeah, just depends on how you do with them, I think.
Yeah. That's pretty much a trend with everything that
yeah, it's very true.
Yeah. Yeah. Which definitely isn't the answer that a lot of people will want, but that's just that's the way it is.
That's right.
It's a lot of experimentation with everything.
Yeah, I mean, when in doubt, just remove something for a few weeks, see how you feel, and then maybe reintroduce it, see if you notice it. You can do that with a lot of things.
Yeah.
Which is, again, kind of the point of this podcast.
Yep. We got one more. This is one that
forgot about, probably the biggest one.
Yeah, this is a doozy, and you know what? It's no one's fault. No one's personal fault. It's the weird little glitch in the fitness industry that occurred over not so much now, but we're dealing with the effects of a fitness industry that was obsessed with just sweating for 20 years. That's what everyone was focused on. So this myth is the idea that you need to do cardio and a lot of it in order to lose weight. Again, 3-second answer is that's false. But a longer explanation, we've talked about this before. When you are doing conditioning-based exercise, so whether it be aerobic training, so longer duration, lower intensities, or high-intensity interval training, you can call it and package it however you want to. The weight loss does not happen because you're doing more conditioning. You sweat more. So let's use this as an example. I go into jiu-jitsu class. I weigh myself before, I'm 204 every time. I weigh myself after, I'm around 198, 197 every time. Does that mean that I lost weight on the scale? Yes, because I sweat out a whole shitload of water and all those electrolytes. And now my body is now depleted and it's below baseline. That doesn't mean that's not a productive thing. That's a side effect of training. It's a side effect of sweating. You lose water mass and you now weigh less. But that is very temporary, because as soon as I drink my 2 liters of water that I lost, my 6 pounds automatically come back. Now, you touched on earlier with the calories in, calories out, but also caloric expenditure is a part of that.
Right.
So if you're in a situation where you're in a caloric deficit for a long period of time, there's a chance that your body is going to decrease in mass. But that's not always a good thing either. It could be muscle wasting. It could be chronic dehydration.
Totally.
It could be an inflammation problem that's resulting in the change in weight on the scale. And using that as a measurement for success in your fitness endeavors, whatever that is for you, is dangerous. And it's definitely dangerous for people it's more dangerous for people to continue to tell people that if they want to lose weight, then you have to do more cardio, because it couldn't be more false. We know that, like you said before, the calories that you're taking in, and then also the, what's the word I'm looking for? How it's all put together.
Macros or?
Yeah. How you're piecing together your calories have a much larger effect on your body mass and your body composition than sweating because sweating doesn't have anything to do
totally.
with it. It's just that simple.
Yeah, that's a thermal regulation mechanism. That's just a mechanism to help adjust your body temperature. So you're sweating to cool your body temperature down. That's all it is.
And this is something that by far more than anything else, I can explain this any way that I want to and support it with any sort of research that I want to. And I still get, oh no, that's not true. Yeah. And I don't know how to make it more clear.
Yeah, I don't either.
But that's the reality of, like, if you want to lose weight, strength train and watch what you're eating. Don't overconsume, right? Live an active lifestyle, and your body's adaptation is going to be more towards an optimal body weight because it's easier for you to move around.
Yeah.
And your body's always trying to find a balance, and that's what it's going to balance out to be.
Yeah, and I think just look at people. Like look at weightlifters, look at sprinters, look at long distance runners. And you just kind of have to ask yourself, if you're concerned with how you look, which one do you want to look like? I don't care which one you want to look like, but if you want to look like an Olympic sprinter, they're not doing more cardio to look like that. I'll tell you that.
Right. Yeah.
Weightlifters, Olympic weightlifters, they're not doing cardio.
No.
Long distance runners, it's funny, like funny thing with track and field in the Olympics when it comes to body composition is you could literally like line up, like starting with 100-meter sprinters, line that up and then go all the way up to your like distance runners or like the marathon runners or the speed walkers. Mm-hmm. You'd be able to see like a perfect progression literally as you go up in distance. Mm-hmm. Like the 800-meter specialists, they'll have less muscle mass than 100-meter, 200-meter folks. The 5K specialists, they'll have a little bit less muscle than the 800-meter folk, but probably more muscle than the marathon runners. Marathon runners, because like you said, the key word here is adaptation. Right. If you're doing excess cardio, your body's going to burn through muscle faster because if you're telling it to be more aerobically fit, well, it doesn't want to carry around a bunch of muscle. Right. And if you're losing muscle, well, then you're decreasing your metabolic rate, and therefore you're actually going to put on more weight from eating the same amount of calories. Right. So like you could make the counter argument in a lot of these circumstances. Right.
And then a counter argument I can hear is people listening to that and say, oh yeah, you're proving my point because the people that do more cardio are smaller. It's sport specific. Right? They're intentionally manipulating their diet in order to maintain a lighter weight. What you won't see is overfat, overinflamed competitive athletes like that because they're managing all of these things. So that's a difference maker. It's not like I'm overfat and I want to become less fat, so I'm going to exercise more. This is my sport. So I'm going to make sure that I'm fueling my body for this specific body type that I need in order to excel in that sport. That's the major difference. It's like, and you can use it even like a weightlifting shoe is heavier than a marathon running shoe. It's the purpose, it's the setup and the structure and the purpose of that particular shoe. It's not like, that's always the argument that I'll get when I bring that up. They're like, yeah, you're proving my point because they're so small. Like, no. You're missing the whole idea. The fuel that person's ingesting and the caloric expenditure that they're having is what's causing them to have that body type over years and decades of training for that sport specifically. They don't do long distance, long duration, low intensity exercise to lose weight. They do it for sport. And that's a very big differentiating factor that has to be super, super clear. It's like health and sport are not the same. And you don't train like a specific athlete to look like that athlete if your goal is health. If your goal is health, then it's a simple, stupid stuff. Weight train, move your body throughout your day. Don't be sedentary.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
That can be your aerobic activity. It's just literally moving your body and then fueling your body for your function. That's what you need to do. And it's to simplify it, it's that simple, but that's too easy to look at it that way. And I think people try to find other ways to just fill the holes. It's like, well, I don't want to eat well. I don't want to eat regularly. I don't want to, be consistent with any sort of nutrition. I'm just going to bounce all over the place and do whatever I want to do, but I'm going to compensate for that by sweating more. And then that'll help me lose weight. And that is what gets you stuck in the cycle of not losing weight, because your body's constantly going to be inflamed because you're under fueling for your function and trying to mask it by just moving your body at a high intensity more often, and your body isn't even recovering from what you're doing. And then you're stuck exactly where you are.
Amen. You could even use the example of people who feel the need that they have to do extra conditioning after a strength training session. Again, you're just giving your body completely conflicting signals. Like if you just did a strength training session, you've given your body the signal to build muscle. Well, if you throw a bunch of cardio on top of that afterwards, you're actually going to prevent some of that muscle building signal. And so you're kind of taking like one step forward, two steps back.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. It's a hard one to get across though.
Yeah, it is.
Because what we're asking for is consistency in stuff, and that's can be a lot easier said than done. But that is the answer. All right. That's it. We got them all.
But yeah, it'd be sweet to hear from you guys if you have any other, because we are 100% missing a lot of the big trends or myths that pop up. Yeah. Like you said before, there's just so many it's hard to think of any.
Yeah, over the course of our 50 plus episodes, we've covered a lot of them already. So those ones were kind of left out of this list because we wanted to kind of get to some that we hadn't had a chance to talk to yet. But it's also a conversation starter podcast where we want you guys to reach out and let us know what you've heard, and then see if it's something that we're familiar with. If not, then it keeps us busy for a couple of days researching it and coming up with some sort of well thought out podcast for you guys to shed some light on the situation. But yeah, I don't know. I'm good with that one for this one.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Good.
I think we should do just like in the future, an episode purely dedicated to call-in questions.
Yeah.
Or maybe make that like a regular thing. So yeah. We'll have to figure out something that works really well for that, whether it's submitting your questions on the website or the socials, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll just keep going.
All right.
Shut it down?
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in.
Catch you guys next week.
Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this talk. I'm already thinking of some big myths that we forgot to hit on, but it's one of those things where there's just so many out there that sometimes it's hard to think of these. So we'll definitely do this one again, especially as we get more feedback from people. So definitely keep sending us those big hot topics that you hear about, the biggest myths. Next week, we're going to talk about the functional fitness. Jesse's going to give an awesome review of not only the different testable elements, but also some big opportunities coming up in the new year to learn about this new, exciting, awesome opportunity. And we're also going to have some holiday hacks for you guys, how to navigate your nutrition and fitness over the holidays, and some big guests coming in the new year. Lastly, we want to say a huge thank you to Adam at London Music Conservatory for helping us with this sound quality. I know that you guys have absolutely noticed this in the past couple of weeks, especially this week. Again, another big upgrade. So thank you very much. And we're really looking forward to continue working there and improving this quality for you guys. So if you like this, please, you know the drill. Give us a review, feedback. It really helps bump us up in the ratings. And the site's up. So if you guys have any specific individual requests, you can reach out to us on there, or just continue reaching out to us on the socials. That's fine too. But it's going to get a lot more interactive heading into the new year. We're pumped. We're looking forward to it. Enjoy your week, guys.